Welcome to the IZ podcast. Number 32 is Culture Stereotyped by Dr. Stephen Phinney. Misunderstood and misjudged, a biblical reflection on Gen Z's struggle for identity and purpose. Generation Z, born into a rapidly changing world, often finds itself labeled as lazy, entitled, or disengaged. Are they? Misunderstood generation. Beneath these stereotypes lies a generation grappling with inherited challenges, economic instability, cultural fragmentation, and spiritual confusion. From a biblical perspective, being misunderstood is not new. Scripture is filled with individuals who were misjudged by their peers but seen and called by God for a greater purpose. This essay explores how Gen Z's frustration reveals biblical themes of identity, calling, and redemption. The weight of misunderstanding. Yeshua himself was misunderstood by his own people. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. John 1 verse 11. Like Christ, Gen Z often feels dismissed by older generations who fail to see the deeper motivations behind their actions. Many young people today are not apathetic, they are overwhelmed to their core. They are not necessarily entitled, they are searching for meaning in a world that often feels hollow. The Bible reminds us that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7. The best way to understand a misunderstood Generation Z is to slow down, listen deeply, and seek to understand before being understood. In a world that often labels them before learning their stories, Gen Z longs not for correction, but for connection. A general parental rule: connection before correction. Taking the time to hear their questions, values, and struggles opens the door to empathy and trust. As James 1 verse 19 reminds us, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. When we truly listen, we don't just bridge a generational gap, we build a relationship that can lead to healing, growth, shared purpose, and even salvation. 2. Inheriting a broken world. Much of Gen Z's frustration stems from navigating systems they did not create, rising debt, cultural anxiety, and spiritual unrest. Like the Israelites born in exile, they are trying to find their identity in a land shaped by the decisions of others. Yet God used even those born in captivity, like Daniel and Esther, to bring about transformation. The challenge is not to escape the brokenness, but to rise within it, anchored in biblical truth. Like ancient Israel, Generation Z has inherited a world shaped by the choices and ideologies of those who came before them, some noble, others deeply flawed. Just as the prophets wept over a nation that had forgotten its covenant, many in Gen Z now wrestle with confusion, compromise, and cultural drift. Yet Scripture reminds us that even in the midst of generational brokenness, God raises up a remnant. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him, if you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. Deuteronomy 4 verse 29. Gen Z is not doomed by what they've inherited, they are positioned for revival. With hearts awakened and truth restored, they can become the generation that turns the tide, not by rejecting the past, but by redeeming it through Christ. 3. The call to purpose. Scripture is clear, every generation has a divine calling. Paul exhorted Timothy, a young leader, not to let anyone despise his youth, but to set an example in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity. 1 Timothy 4 verse 12. Gen Z is not disqualified by age or misunderstood motives. In fact, their passion for justice, authenticity, and mental health can be powerful tools in God's hands, if rooted in His Word. Are we despising Gen Z? Not this writer. To despise Generation Z is not only a failure of compassion, it is a spiritual tragedy with far-reaching consequences. Scripture warns that in the last days, hearts will grow cold and generations will turn against one another. 2 Timothy 3 verses 1-5. When older generations dismiss or condemn Gen Z instead of discipling them, they risk fueling the very confusion, rebellion, and despair that characterize the end times. Rather than being a lost cause, Gen Z is a mission field, deeply wounded, yet deeply hungry for truth. If the church and Christian society continue to reject them, we may accelerate the moral unraveling foretold in prophecy. But if we choose to love, equip, and call them into their God-given purpose, they could become the generation that sparks revival in the midnight hour. The stakes are eternal, and the time is now. 4. A church that sees and shepherds. The church must resist the temptation to stereotype and instead embrace its role as a spiritual family, spiritual parents. Just as Barnabas saw potential in the once rejected Saul, the church is called to see Gen Z not as a problem to fix, but as a generation to disciple. This means listening, mentoring, and creating space for honest questions and spirit-led growth. Yeshua is calling his church with urgency and compassion to rise and disciple Generation Z, not as an afterthought, but as a vital part of completing his divine mission. Just as he commissioned his followers in Matthew 28 verses 19-20 to go and make disciples of all nations, that call shouts out now with fresh intensity for this generation. Gen Z stands at a crossroads, surrounded by noise, confusion, and spiritual hunger. Yeshua is challenging us to meet them where they are, with truth, love, and authenticity, so they may know him, be indwelt by him, follow him, and carry his light into a darkening world. If we are to see the Great Commission fulfilled in our time, we must invest in Gen Z not just as the future of the church, but as its present force for revival. The mission is not paused, it is pressing forward, and Gen Z is central to its advance. Never forget. Being misunderstood is painful, but it is not the end of the story. Gen Z, like many before them, is navigating a world in need of redemption. The church has a choice, to criticize from a distance or to walk alongside them in truth and love. As Scripture reminds us, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, Psalm 118 verse 22. Perhaps the generation most misunderstood is the one God is preparing to lead a revival. Thank you for listening. Stay safe in the indwelling life of Yeshua. Until next time.
Today's program was brought to you by Identity Matters Worldview Media. We provide short films, media bites, podcasts, and other productions to help authentic believers discover their identity in the life of Yeshua. You can discover over 1,000 productions at iomamerica.net.